This struggle arose chiefly in the central textile district. On June 5th, the police fired a volley at the weavers in Kostroma. 4 killed, 9 wounded. On August 10, the troops fired on the Ivanovo-Vosnesensk workers. 16 killed, 30 wounded. In the movement of the textile workers, some soldiers of a local battalion are involved. Protest strikes in various parts of the country give answer to the shootings at Ivanovo-Vosnesensk. Parallel to this goes the economic struggle. The textile workers often march in the front rank. In comparison with the first half of 1914, this movement, as regards strength of pressure and clarity of slogans, represents a big step backward. This is not surprising, since raw masses are to a large extent being drawn into the struggle, and there has been a complete disintegration of the guiding layer of the workers. Nevertheless, even in these first strikes of the war, the approach of great battles can be heard. The Minister of Justice, Kvostov, said on the 16th of August, if there are at present no armed demonstrations of the workers, it is only because they have as yet no organization. Goremikin expressed himself more concisely. The trouble among the workers' leaders is that they have no organization, since it was broken up by the arrest of the 5 members of the Duma. The Minister of Interior added, "We must not amnesty the members of the Duma, Bolsheviks. They are the organizing center of the movement in its most dangerous form. These people, at least, made no mistake as to who was the real enemy." While the ministry, even at the moment of its greatest dismay and readiness for liberal concessions, deemed it necessary as before to pound the workers' revolution on the head, i.e., on the Bolsheviks, the big bourgeoisie was trying to fix up a cooperation with the Mensheviks. Frightened by the scope of the strike movement, the liberal industrialists made an attempt to impose patriotic discipline upon the workers by including their elected representatives in the staff of the military industrial committees. The Minister of the Interior complained that it was very difficult to oppose this scheme, flattered by Gushkov. The whole enterprise, he said, is being carried out under a patriotic flag and in the interests of the defense. We must remark, however, that even the police avoided arresting the social patriots, seeing in them a side partner in the struggle against strikes and revolutionary excesses. It was indeed upon their too great confidence in the strength of patriotic socialism that the Secret Service based their conviction that no insurrection will occur while the war lasted. In the election of the military industrial committees, the defensists, headed by an energetic metal worker, Gvozdev, we shall meet him later as Minister of Labor in the coalition government of the revolution, turned out to be a minority. They enjoyed the support, however, not only of the liberal bourgeoisie, but of the but of the bureaucracy in getting the better of those who, led by the Bolsheviks, wished to boycott the committees. They succeeded in imposing a representation in these organs of industrial patriotism upon the Petersburg proletariat. The position of the Mensheviks was clearly expressed in a speech of their representatives later made to the industrialists in the committee. You ought to demand that the existing bureaucratic power retire from the scene, yielding its place to you as the inheritors of the present social structure. This young political friendship was growing by leaps and bounds. After the revolution, it will bring forth its ripe fruit. The war produced a dreadful desolation in the underground movement. After the arrest of the Duma faction of the Bolsheviks had no centralized party organization at all. The local committees has an episodic existence and often had no connections with the workers' districts. Only scattered groups, circles, and solidarity individuals did anything. However, the reviving strike movement gave them some spirit and some strength in the factories. They gradually began to find each other and build up the district connections. The underground work revived. In the police department, they wrote later, ever since the beginning of the war, the Leninists who have behind them in Russia an overwhelming majority of the underground social democratic organizations having their larger centers such as Petrograd, Moscow, Kharkov, Kiev, Tula, Kostroma, Vladimir Province, Samara, been issuing in considerable numbers revolutionary appeals with a demand to stop the war, overthrow the existing government, and found a republic. And this work has had in its palpable results in worker strikes and disorders. The traditional anniversary of the March of the Workers to the Winter Palace, which had passed almost unnoticed the year before, produces a widespread strike on January 9, 1916. The strike movement doubles during this year. Encounters with the police accompany every big and prolonged strike. In contact with the troops, the workers conduct themselves with demonstrative friendliness, and the secret police more than once noticed this alarming fact. The war industries swelled out, devouring all resources around them and undermining their own foundation. The peacetime branches of production began to die away. In spite of all planning, nothing came of the regulation of industry. The bureaucracy, incapable of taking this business in hand against the opposition of the powerful military industrial committees, at the same time refused to turn over the regulation role to the bourgeoisie. The chaos increased. Skilled workers were replaced by unskilled. The coal mines, shops, and factories of Poland were soon lost. In the course of the first year of the war, a fifth part of the industrial strength of the country was cut off. As much as 50% of production went to supply the needs of the army and the war, including about 75% of the textile production of the country. The overloaded transport proved incapable of supplying factories with the necessary quantity of fuel and raw material. The war not only swallowed swallowed up the whole current national income, but seriously began to cut into the basic capital of the country. The industrialists grew less and less willing to grant anything to the workers, and the government, as usual, answered every strike with severe repressions. All this pushed the minds of the workers from the particular to the general, from economics to politics. We must all strike at once. Thus arose the idea of the general strike. The process of radicalization of the masses is most convincingly reflected in the strike statistics. In 1915, 2.5 times fewer workers participated in political strikes than in economic strikes. In 1916, twice as few. In the first few months of 1917, political strikes involved 6 times as many workers as economic. The role of Petrograd is portrayed in one figure. 72% of the political strike during the years of the war fall to her lot. Many of the old beliefs are burned up in the fires of this struggle. The Secret Service reports with pain that if they should react according to the dictates of the law to every instance of insolence and open insult to His Majesty, the number of trials under Article 103 will reach an unheard of figure. Nevertheless, the consciousness of the masses is far behind their action. The terrible pressure of the war and the national ruin is accelerating the process of struggle to such a degree that broad masses of the workers right up to the very revolution have not freed themselves from many opinions and prejudices brought with them from the village or from the petty bourgeois family circle in the town. This fact will set its stamp on the first stage of the February Revolution. By the end of the 1916, prices are rising by leaps and bounds. To the inflation and the breakdown of transport, there is added an actual lack of goods. The demands of the population have been cut down by this time to one-half. The curve of the workers' movements rises sharply. In October, the struggle enters its decisive phase, uniting all forms of discontent in one. Petrograd draws back for the February leap. A wave of meetings runs through the factories. The topics: food supplies, high cost of living, war, government. Bolshevik leaflets are distributed. Political strikes begin. Improvised demonstrations occur at factories' gates. Cases of fraternization between certain factories and the soldiers are observed. A stormy protest strike flares up over the trial of the revolutionary sailors of the Baltic Fleet. The French ambassador calls Premier Sturmer's attention to the fact become known to him that some soldiers have shot at the police. Sturmer quiets the ambassador. The repressions will be ruthless. In November, a good-sized group of workers on military duty are removed from the Petrograd factories and sent to the front. The year ends in storm and thunder. Comparing the situation with that in 1905, the director of the police department, Vasiliev, reaches a very uncomforting conclusion. The mood of the opposition has gone very far beyond anything to be seen in the broad masses during the above-mentioned period of disturbance. Vasilia rests no hope in the garrison. Even the police officers are not entirely reliable. The intelligence department reports a revival of the slogan of the general strike, the danger of a resurrection of the terror. Soldiers and officers arriving from the front say of the present situation. What is there to wait for? Why don't you take and bump off such and such as scoundrel? If we were here, we wouldn't waste much time thinking, etc. Slyapnikov, a member of the Bolshevik Central Committee, himself a former metal worker, describes how nervous the workers were in those days. Sometimes a whistle would be enough, or any kind of noise. The workers will take it for a signal to stop the factory. This detail is equally remarkable both as a political symptom and as a psychological fact. The revolution is there in the nerves before it comes out on the street. The provinces are passing through the same stages, only more slowly. The growth in massiveness of the movement and in fighting spirit shifts the center of gravity from the textile to the metal workers, from economic strikes to political, from the provinces to Petrograd. The first 2 months of 1917 show 565,000 political strikes, the lion's share of them in the capital, in spite of new raids carried out by the police. On the eve of January 9, 150,000 workers went on strike in the capital on that anniversary of blood. The mood was tense. The metal workers were in the lead. The workers all felt that no retreat was possible. In every factory, an active nucleus was forming, oftenest around the Bolsheviks. Strikes and meetings went on consciously throughout the first 2 weeks of February. On the 8th, at the Putilov factory, the police received a hail of slag and old iron. On the 14th, the day the Duma opened, about 90,000 were on strike in Petrograd. Several plants also stopped work in Moscow. On the 16th, the authorities decided to introduce bread carts in Petrograd. This novelty rasped the nerves. On the 19th, a mass of people gathered around the foodstuffs, especially women, all demanding bread. A day later, bakeries were sacked in several parts of the city. These were the headlines of the revolution, coming in a few days. The Russian proletariat found its revolutionary audacity not only in itself. Its very position as minority of the nation suggests that it could not have given its struggle a sufficient scope, certainly not enough to take its place at the head of the state. If it had not found a mighty support in the thick of the people, such a support was guaranteed to it by the agrarian problem. The belated half-liberation of the peasants in 1861 had found agricultural industry almost on the same level as 200 years before. The preservation of the old area of communal land, somewhat filched from during the reform, together with an archaic methods of land culture, automatically sharpened a crisis caused by the rural excess of population, which was at the same time a crisis in the threefold system. The peasantry felt still more caught in a trap because the process was not taking place in the 17th but in the 19th century, that is, in the conditions of an advanced money economy which made demands upon the wooden plow that could only be met by a tractor. Here too, we see a drawing together of separate stages of historic process, and as a result, an extreme sharpening of contradictions. The learned agronomes and economists has been preaching that the whole area with rational cultivation will be amply sufficient. That is to say, they proposed to peasants to make a jump to a higher level of technique and culture without disturbing the landlords, the bailiff, or the Tsar. But no economic regime lists of all an agricultural regime, the most tardy of all, has ever disappeared before exhausting all its possibilities. Before feeling compelled to pass over to a more intensive economic culture, the peasant had to make a last attempt to broaden his tree fields. This could obviously be achieved only at the expense of non-peasant lands, shocking in the narrowness of his land area under the smarting whip of the treasury and the market. The Musik was inexorably forced to attempt to get rid of the landlord once for all.